Let's go.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Woohoo! We made it.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I can't tell how many people we have on here. 23 participants. That's fantastic. I appreciate you all joining us this morning. I apologize for the delay. We had a little technical issues on this end. But I really appreciate, my name's Greg Moon. And I guess we could jump to the next one. Yeah, my name's Greg Moon, and Craig and Tim Spence and I will be giving you the presentation. But first, if you'll jump back one, Diane, I would like to introduce our sponsor. Modular Services has been the sponsor for this design prep seminar, or for the exam prep seminar for many years, and have done a wonderful job in taking care of us. Unfortunately, we're not meeting face to face. They always put on a real nice event after the seminar. Do we have somebody on from Modular that could just say a few words? Usually it's Zach. Okay. Let me just throw out a good. Let me just throw out some info, though. I had a great experience with Modular, and I would recommend them highly. They do the head wall systems in our healthcare facilities, and I had a project in San Antonio that was like building a Swiss watch, and they came through with flying colors. They did a fantastic job on a NICU at the University Medical Center. So I can't say enough about how responsive and how thorough and how professional Modular is, and I really appreciate their time. And that's not just a plug, that's real life having to do work with them, and they did a great job. I'm very impressed. And if you ever get to see, we ever get back together, definitely say hi to Zach when we get to a convention or a conference. And I guess we can move on. So thank you, Modular, for your help. Again, let's go back. My name is Greg Moon. I have a private consulting, healthcare design and planning consulting firm in Houston. And I've been with ACHA. Actually, I'm one of the founding members, so been around for what, 15 years, something like that now, 16 years. And hopefully you'll get an understanding of how important the college is to your professional advancement as a healthcare architect. And hopefully we describe that, and certainly if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or to contact us after this webinar. So the other two presenters, Craig Pichetti and Tim Spence, I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, hey, good morning, everyone. Craig Pichetti with BSA Life Structures. I'm actually a principal with a healing market focus in our Austin, Texas office, and I have actually been ACHA certified for, I guess it's about 4 years. So I'm probably the newbie to the bunch. So yeah, look forward to talking to you.
Thanks, Craig. And I'm Tim Spence. I'm president at BSA Life Structures. I reside in Raleigh, but I'm in our Indianapolis office here today. And I've been with ACHA since 2014. I was certified in 14. So back to you, Greg.
All right. ACHA, this webinar that we're doing today is an AI approved course. We've got listed the 4 learning objectives, which is education on a unique building code requirements for healthcare architecture, unique programming requirements for healthcare projects, education on the unique planning requirements for healthcare projects, and the value of a specialty certification to owners and architects in the field of healthcare architecture. And also just kind of, I might say it again, but just as an FYI, healthcare architecture is the only AIA approved specialty certification. So our agenda, we will, let's see, we jumped to the next one there, Diane. Okay. Agenda, we've broken it down into 3 sections. The first is going to be an introduction. What is the ACHA? What is the American College of Healthcare Architects? We'll give you a little bit of a history. We'll give you a little bit of our personal input, but it's actually what it is to bring us to this point. And then the next part will be what you all are probably wanting to hear real closely, and that is the 3 steps to certification. And Craig and Tim will go through that and try to explain and answer any questions you have. Also, just give you some direction and some helpful tips and hints on ways to streamline your process to become get your certification documents in and to take the exam. And then speaking of exam, we have some sample questions at the end, just to give you an idea of how the questions are written, and just kind of the idea of how, what we're looking for in the exam. So the vision and the mission for the college is transforming healthcare through better built environments. And that's real important because we have an obligation to give our clients and their clients, who are actually hospital patients and staff, the best environment to work in. A healthcare facility is already a high stress place of work. Even think about it, if you're going to visit somebody in the hospital, you're not sick, but your friend is, there is a level of stress, you know, and fear, and just even with you as a visitor. So it's very important that we give the highest quality of environment, not only as a functional, but as an aesthetic and nerve calming and caring type of environment. The mission: to distinguish healthcare architects through certification, experience, and rigorous standards. A healthcare architect has architecture is a specialty. We've got a lot of rules and regulations and codes and standards that that most architects don't have to worry about. And they're very critical, because if you think about it, when we turn over the keys to a healthcare facility, it's got to work. There's no, oh, we got to go back and fix something, because when you start seeing patients, that's it. You really have turned over the apple cart if you've got to stop things and redo. So we are designing and aiding in the construction of a facility that when we turn over the keys, it operates 24/7. And there's no breaks. The mission is to distinguish, so that's the mission, is to distinguish us as a certified healthcare architect, and our clients are certified generally. If you're meeting with doctors or nurses, they have been certified through their personal organization, their professional organization, and they understand what it means and what it takes to be certified. So it's not a foreign term to them. They understand it, and they had to go through a certification process, so they should understand and appreciate us going through a certification process. So, and just to kind of give you a quick glance, there are 425 active certificate holders right now in the United States, Canada, and I'm not sure if we have any in Australia yet or not, but those are the 3 countries that we have certificates in. And as you can see, scattered around, like I say, 425 active certificates, 47 of them, 47 fellows, and in addition, 47 certificates are emeritus. So as you can see, mostly the Eastern United States. We need to start filling in that Western side. The steps to certification. We want to demonstrate the licensure and experience, which is a prerequisite. Those are things that you have to have, and we'll discuss this further in a few minutes. The experience, of course, you have to be licensed, and your experience, you have to have a certain amount of experience to begin the process, or to finish the process, let's put it that way. And we'll talk about in detail the portfolio and, of course, the exam. Let's see, where am I at? Okay, the portfolio and exam process can be completed in any order. This is something that we did that happened this year, is this what we call the decoupling. In other words, that process of one before the other. It used to be you had to have all your portfolio information complete and turned in, and then you signed up for the examination. That process is optional. You can do it both. You can go either exam first, portfolio later. The bottom line is you don't become a certificate holder until you've completed both. Okay, we can move to the next one. The pathway to the certification eligibility pathways. The candidate program, the question, do you not yet meet the exam eligibility requirements? And we'll get into that in a moment. You begin the candidate program, and here's a brief explanation of that. It's you can be in the candidate program for up to 5 years. It's $25 a year. The candidacy does not qualify you as eligible to sit for an exam. You still have to complete all the requirements, such as the application and things like that. That's pathway number one. Pathway number two is the exam applicant. You do meet the exam eligibility. Do you meet the eligibility requirements? And the certification handbook will outline for you what those requirements are. And again, all the information has to be received and completed before you can proceed. And we'll talk about that again in that next section, in the next section in this discussion. Next is licensure and experience. You have to practice for a minimum of 3 years. You have been practicing as a licensed architect in one of the U.S. states, Canada, or the Australian provinces, and you have to be a licensed architect in good standing. Your experience to demonstrate 6,000 hours of healthcare experience within the last 5 years. We will go into that a little bit further too. And I know that we're on a committee that I'm on, the certification committee, actually. We're presenting to the board a little bit of a tweak to that, and it's not been done yet, so I won't, it's not really changing things, but we're trying to even make this experience a little bit more, less stressful, a little more pleasant. And so your experience, you have to demonstrate 6,000 hours within the last 5 years, and then you become an ACHA candidate. So to submit your application, it's general information, qualifications, experience. You'll have an experience log and employment experience. You submit your application fee, And once approved, you'll be assigned the examination and portfolio. And this is just, let's see, we can jump to the next slide there, because what it does is it's just showing those forms that were on that last slide. You'll have an application form to fill out. It's several pages, basic general information. Then there's, there's the next page. Like I say, there's nothing, there's no rocket science there. Then there's the examination and portfolio. And this is what we'll go into next, because this is an important item, and it can be time consuming, it can be a little bit stressful, and you want to make sure you get it right. And of course you want it to be a nice looking professional presentation. Approximately 4 to 6 weeks following the submission deadline, applicants will receive a notification via email as to whether or not their portfolio was accepted. Instruction for scheduling your exam will be within that will be on that notification. The exam window is the month of July, at least it is this year, July 1st through 31st. And if there is, if you happen to not pass the exam on the first time, the next testing, you have to wait for the next testing window to be able to take your exam. And let's see, so where are we at? Are we at number 18 yet? Yeah, so the reference letters. Reference letters, it's very important. And the reference letters, and again, we'll go into that in a little more detail in just a minute, but basically you need to get reference letters from past or for people that you have done work with and work for. Here's just kind of a general outline, but we'll get into more detail in that in a minute. But what you want to do, and this is and the reason why this is kind of a separate little slide, is it happens, a lot of people have other things to do besides write a reference letter for you. So if you can help them out by you send them a request, ask them if they'll do it. You can send them a draft of the letter, give them something to go by, not just have to come up from scratch with some kind of letter. You can give them a draft, kind of an outline of what they can write for you. You need to set a deadline and keep following up then, because this is the tough part. It doesn't sound like much. It just sounds like a letter from a client. But like I said, your clients are busy also, and it's probably not on the front burner. So you want to make sure, because you don't want this simple thing to be the deal that drags you down and you miss your exam window. So like I say, it's important that you get a good reference letter, and we'll help you out with, in this presentation, we can go through a little bit of what it needs to look like and how we can compose that. So where are we? So the next slide.
With that.
Requirement. Yeah, we'll jump to Craig Pichetti with that now.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. I'm going to go through the portfolio requirements, and then Tim will work into the exam discussion, and then we'll kind of close out with questions and some sample questions as well. So basically, with your portfolio, you want to really concentrate on projects that really are kind of your standout projects that help to really show your experience as a healthcare architect, some variety of projects and size. So 3 of the 9 projects are typically what need to be submitted on for this submission. I'm going to show you an example of actually mine here in a little bit that I did almost 5 years ago. when I started my preparation for this path. And so identify your 3 of the 9 projects, and then start accruing and assembling all the pieces from photos to renderings to various images and information that will actually help back up those projects. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the projects that you decide on will be the most appropriate to demonstrate your experience and your diversity of experience. Basically are going to be submitted in the form of 8.5 by 11 landscape, portrait orientation project pages. The submission is limited to 4 pages per project. You can see from that little example down there, it's have some renderings, some photos. You have your project statistics, construction cost, information about the project, statistics specific to the project that might be of interest to the people evaluating the portfolio and helping to define the project typology. It also wants to describe your role on the project specifically. Were you the medical planner? Were you the, were you the project manager? Were you the project architect? Did you concentrate on envelope? Did you, what was your role specifically? And then you also have a non-applicant signature on this project page that is basically a test to your experience. It can be a client signature, or it can be a individual from your team that can basically attest to your role on the project and that you're involved in the project. And of course, it will all be electronic, submitted in a PDF format at the end. Next, please. Okay, so what is the committee, the certification committee specifically looking for? So part of everything's weighted a certain way in terms of what they're looking at, with the project experience being, obviously paramount. But also these letters that Greg referenced earlier are going to be very important. You actually want to get an architect letter of fellow architects you've worked with, or people that architects and that know your standing in the industry and your experience, recognizing you as a leader with an expertise in healthcare architecture specifically. So you'll want to reach out to identify the architects in your life and in your career that can help represent you in that light. Similarly, on the client side, you want to make sure the client, believes in you and that they feel that you are appropriate for this certification. They want to specifically, state that they feel that you're eligible. You should be an eligible candidate for this type of certification due to the fact that you're experienced. And then, of course, the projects themselves, which is going to be very pretty much weigh pretty heavily on demonstrating your experience. Is there a diversity of experience? Is there size and typology and responsibilities? Do you just serve one role on a project in every project, or are you able to represent a diversity of roles as well amongst some of the represented projects? Next, please. Yeah, so you're going to be evaluated on the quality of the material itself, which is going to be important to treat it like you're preparing any submission, whether it's an RFQ or RFP, or whether you're preparing a portfolio for employment. You want to treat it in a similar manner, obviously, as professionally as possible. You want to make sure it's clear to navigate, it's easy to find the information, nothing's ambiguous about what you're trying to explain. I think being concise is probably not a bad thing. You have up to 4 pages, but how you choose You don't have to do 4 pages if you feel that you can be concise, but if you feel you have the quality to fill up 4 full pages, and then go for it. But I think the brevity can actually be a positive thing sometimes if you can get a strong, establish a strong, presentation for your projects. So it's going to be important. Are your projects aesthetically appealing? Do they demonstrate kind of a healing environment that's been created through the design? Is there innovative planning involved in the projects you're representing? Also wants to make sure that the projects have some credibility, that your story of your role and how the project stories tie in, and that it's there's no disconnects in how it might be described in your role and how the projects are. That's truly representative of your work and your involvement in a project, and not some generic firm marketing material that is representative of maybe someone else's experience or a team's experience. It really needs to be specific to you, and it needs to make sure that it's really tracking credibly with your career path and what would be expected based on your role.
Craig, that's a real important point, I believe, what you just made as far as showing your projects. Remember, your firm is not being certified, or whoever you work for. That entity is not being certified. It is a certification for you. So it's what you did, what you produced to address the qualifications. And like I say, just remember, when you go through this and you get finished and you've passed the exam and all your documentation is in, you are the certified architect, not your firm.
Right. Thank you, Greg. So you can see the deadline of April 1 is actually passed. Hopefully some of you on the call actually are going to be getting notification of eligibility for examination in the near future. As Greg mentioned earlier, the exam window is in July. And you can see actually that June 1st is if you choose to submit for the exam this year, that will be your deadline for that particular submission. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly somewhat reiterate what I've said generally already in terms of just my own portfolio, in terms of what was I had submitted. Like I said earlier, approach it like you would anything that would be, something easy to navigate and understand. So I put it together much like an RFQ or RFP. Had table of contents, cover sheet, just general professionalism and organization, I think, is important and appreciated by the committee that basically reviews these. Everything is now going to be obviously online. My format was a hair different, but now it's all online, and you'll be submitting them to this online portal that was flashed up earlier. I was just referencing the prior slide shows I actually included a professional resume as part of my submission as well, that helped to highlight projects beyond my 5, just to kind of show a diversity of experience beyond what was represented in the portfolio 5 projects themselves. So I included that a little bit, gave a little bit more additional information about myself. Keep going. And then the letters, like we talked about earlier, just make sure that your client and your architect, are people that really truly know you. Sometimes people ask me, well, C-suite, if on your client side, does it have to be, the C-suite? Does it have to be facilities? Does it have to be, who is it? Is it the OR director? I think it just really depends on, it's case by case, depending on how the roles were kind of structured throughout the project and who you worked with closest. Certainly C-suite is not a bad thing if they understood your role in the project and were regularly involved. Next. So your projects, you can, like I said earlier, three of the 9. I chose myself to feature 5 projects. And so I featured a freestanding emergency department, an interior hospital renovation, a freestanding medical office building with multi-specialty clinics, and an interior hospital addition and renovation, and a freestanding ASC, ambulatory surgery center project. The idea was to represent a full typology of from licensed to unlicensed, from renovation to addition to to try and cover the full range in terms of construction cost as well. I tried to represent a broad range of project types that I had been involved in. In most of my cases, I was the principal in charge, kind of project architect / medical planner. My role did not change much on any of the projects, so I did not really have much of a diversity in role, but apparently that did not weigh too heavily on me. I would say that if you do have, I probably could have highlighted some of my other roles on the job, because I definitely had more than those 2 roles, just as a suggestion for you all, to make sure you highlight, really your different roles, major roles you filled on the job. Next. Yeah, so this is just kind of highlighting specifically the project pages. I chose you can do up to 4. I think I did 3. Floor plans, if you have nicely colored floor plans, you've got renderings, you've got professional photos that your firm or your prior firms allow you to use. All that stuff's fair game. Your project descriptions, along with your project details, and then including your consulting team, and then your individual that attest that you were your role on the project. Next. Yeah, this is just another one. This is showing the MOB with all the multi-specialty clinics. You can see I featured some floor plans that showed all the individual multi-specialty clinics colored and indicating what was what and kind of how it all worked together to support the story. And then the deadlines. Actually, you can keep going. That's fine. The deadlines, just to reiterate. So the application, April 1, is already come and gone, but the exam deadline is coming up here at the beginning of next month, and it's just shy of a month. So if you're going to take the exam, make sure you get that in time. I cannot reiterate. This pretty much builds on what Greg said earlier. Start preparing everything early. I think the new process of decoupling really helps in terms of, you can go ahead if you feel confident that you're ready for the exam. You can go ahead and take time on your portfolio and maybe do in the next round, concentrate on the exam, or you can, or vice versa. But either way, spend some time with the submission. Everyone's busy right now, I know that, and it's going to take a lot longer than you expect. If you're trying to get rights to a photo or using photos from former firms, that could take time. And as Greg said, getting a reference letter from 3 architects and 3 clients is probably one of the biggest challenges, quite frankly. Everyone's really, really busy. I recommend being redundant with your request. If you have to get 3, send out 5 requests. Definitely send out a sample of what's expected, because that will help them maybe quickly understand what they're needing to do. So yeah, just prep far in advance, and I think you'll be happy that you did, and it will not feel overwhelming if you just space it out. Yeah, with that, I'm gonna kick it over to Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Craig and Greg. And just guys, we did have some questions that came in. I have been busy trying to answer them. You can make sure my answers are correct, if you don't mind. I get to talk about exam prep. And some of you, this is an uncomfortable topic because you haven't taken an exam in a while. So we're here to help. First thing that we would say is read that candidate handbook. And if you do a simple Google search, ACHA candidate handbook, you'll go right there. It's fairly succinct and offers a lot of good information. As Greg and Craig both said, this is offered once a year during the July period at 200 testing centers in the US. And I would say come prepared if you do want to take that exam. This isn't something that you can wing at the last minute. We would also strongly encourage you to take the practice exam. It does get you in the mindset of what kind of questions are you going to encounter? How would you work yourself through those questions? And you'll get a chance today to see some samples of those questions. And then finally, connect with a mentor. ACHA is really great about this. And I had a mentor going through this and still have the same mentor today. And a lifelong friendship there. There's people out there that want to help you and plan ahead. All right, so next slide, just a quick plug for this exam prep. This is Valerie Miller, who recently took the exam, and she said it was one of the most helpful as I prepared for the ACH exam. We would just say, again, it's really great information. You can get to it on the ACHA website under practice exam. So strongly encourage that. Next slide is study resources. Where should you go to get prepared for this? And if you don't know the FGIA guidelines, you need to know them. I know it's like a lot of information. There's 3 volumes now as of 2018. I would really focus on the first 2 volumes. The 3rd volume is more residential. And then NFPA 101, and we'll go into what specific chapters, but you need to know that as well. And I'll make one more plug. If this is not on here, but I found it extremely helpful when I was going through the exam. And that was a while ago, 7 years ago, but the Building Type Basics for Healthcare Facilities, 2nd edition, Wiley, was just really great because it gives you a good baseline of information you need to know as a healthcare architect. And as Greg said earlier, this is a specialty. On the next slide, a little bit more about FGI and how it's organized. As I said, there are a couple volumes. The blue on the left-hand side is the hospitals. So there's a whole volume dedicated to that. There's a whole volume, volume 2, dedicated to outpatient facilities. And then if you dig into each one of those, and some of you may be more familiar with this, I see that question there on the Wiley book, and I will type that out here in a minute. So if you dig into FGI, you will notice that it's divided into 3 parts. I think part 3 is more about MEP, but part 1 is considerations that are applicable to all healthcare. And then part 2 addresses specific facilities like, let's say, a critical access hospital or a rehab facility or a freestanding emergency department. It's really a little bit more specific to that typology. On the next slide, wanted to address, you can see the 3 volumes off on the left-hand side. There is a part of FGI that comes up, it shows up at the bottom in this appendix tab. It's tabbed, it's a different grayscale. And it is something that you need to know. Now, it is not code for those of you that know FGI well. It's really more best practice, but this is something that you may encounter exam questions on, so you need to be familiar with that as well.
Yeah, Tim, that's important. I've been on FGI since 1994. And that is the whole purpose of that appendix is the code material has to be, the material in the body of the text has to be specific because it's actually legal documents in over 40, almost all the US states. It's used by the Department of Health, which makes it a legal document. The appendix is not a legal document, as Tim said, or not legally binding, but the appendix information a lot of times explains what we were thinking when we wrote up in in section 2.3.2, 16.9.1, paragraph 2, what were we saying? I mean, you've got one, why was that what it was? And sometimes they're very verbose, and that's the reason why, is but we're trying to explain how we got to where we got. So the authorities having jurisdiction can do their job in the body form of the text, and you can do your job by understanding what the body form of the text is saying. So it is a long, sometimes it's very cumbersome, but it's great information, like Tim said.
Right.
Thanks for that, Greg. So NFPA 101, it's a thick one too. And what we want to focus you on is the chapters that deal with healthcare. There are a couple chapters on basics, like chapter 7 with means of egress and some of those things that you as an architect need to understand. Is fundamentally, there's a lot of crossover between the International Building Code in this, but on NFPA 101, chapters 18, 19 are all about new healthcare occupancies, and chapters 20 and are about existing. Did I get that right? No, I'm sorry. Let me back up. So chapter 18 and 19 is about new healthcare, and one chapter is about existing and one's about new. And then chapter 20 and 21 is about ambulatory healthcare. One's about new and one's about existing. And then there is a chapter on building rehabilitation and some of the things that you need to know there if you are doing renovations inside a building and what you need to update on that. Some additional things to study. American Disabilities Act, and I imagine some of you are feeling a little overwhelmed right now. These are all these take some time. And for me personally, I put together a study schedule and kept on it for a good 3 months. And if you're more along the lines that you've been practicing a while, some of these, you use them day in and day out, they will be less difficult. If you are a little bit newer in the profession or younger, you're going to need some time here. So that last one is Joint Commission. That's another great resource. And it is the thing that we are judged by in terms of operating those facilities. So the next slide talks a little bit more about the exam details, what you can expect. It's 120 questions. 100 of those are scored. 20 of them are non-scored, which means they're really pre-test questions that are being tried out. You have no way of telling which one is which. And what we would encourage you is don't get hung around the axle by a question. Continue to move through the questions. You can always come back. You have 2.5 hours to do this. All of them are multiple choice. Now this is, you'll see in our examples later on, these are not easy multiple choice. Sometimes they are, a lot of good options sound, or all the options sound good, and you have to pick the one that is best, but you're not penalized for guessing. So you don't want to leave them blank at the end of the day. And you do receive your score at the end of 60 days. And we've had some questions in the past about why is that? Why can't I have that immediately? And they do use the Angoff method, which is they estimate the probability of each question. And then those ratings are averaged to determine a passing score. And you can find out more about this in the candidate handbook if you have questions. The next talks a little bit about some of the exam content. And there are three types of questions that you're going to get. Some are recall, recognition, and that's really good stuff when it comes down to if you want to make flashcards for yourself. I actually did that. I know I'm probably a nerd, but I think I still have those flashcards floating around in my car somewhere. It's specific factual information. Some of them are application. So you have to take those facts and you have to apply them to a certain scenario. And then the third kind is an analysis, which means the integration of a variety of concepts and understanding the variables that impact those. And it's really judgment questions. Again, 100 total questions. Next slide. So here, the next slide talks about the detailed exam content outline. Here, we'll go through how many questions are in each of these, and you can kind of tell where to spend your time. But there are questions about forces that drive the business of healthcare. You need to be aware of these things. This is your client's business. You need to be able to essentially kind of square off with them and help them in their business. There's some on pre-design, some on design, and then design and implementation. Go to the next slide. It starts to talk more about this, and I know this writing's really small. You can get this in the exam or the ACHA candidate handbook, but that forces that drive the business of healthcare, you will get a total of 15 questions out of the 100 on those. And you can see some of the categories there: economics, regulation, healthcare models, and so on. Under pre-design, you will get 35 questions on that. And they deal with probably a little bit more stuff that you are familiar with in your day in and day out, which is stuff like programming and workload analysis and so on. Next slide. I think I got them all there. Yep. So the third category is design, and that is 35 questions. So you can tell between the pre-design and the design piece, that's a good chunk of questions, 70 questions between those. And then finally, on the delivery and implementation piece, 15 questions, and that makes up your 100 questions. So you can dig back into more detail again on the candidate handbook. Passing the exam, here's the tips that we would give you. Read the questions carefully, answer only what the question is asking. Don't read into a question too much, and just answer it for face value. Compare answers and determine most probable, and that's what we were talking about earlier. Utilize all the time that you have available. Don't rely solely on your experience. And we say that because sometimes experience is different than what we should be doing. We've learned wrong habits, so tie those back. Focus tips on forces that influence healthcare. This is probably one that gives a lot of people anxiety about, like, how am I supposed to get up to speed on all these kind of things, and what am I supposed to know? And we would just encourage you to be a connoisseur of that type of information. It's out there. Current news, articles, journals, and white papers, things that are current, and some of these are a little bit dated, but the Ebola virus risk level, trauma classifications, lab classification levels, medical terms and acronyms. If you've been around the industry, there's a lot of those, and I won't belabor the point, but bone up on those as well. Next. And then you need to be familiar with CMS and some of the regulatory accreditation accountable care. We talked about the resource that was more joint commission legislation. And again, some of these are a little bit dated, but the Affordable Care Act and some of the things that were there, care delivery models like medical homes and patient-centered care, and then bundled payments under reimbursement. On when it comes to site master planning and facilities, you do need to understand some what I call big macro ideas, and these are things that if you've been working around healthcare, you'll understand. I gave the resource earlier, the typology book, and I wrote it into the answers there. If you're not as familiar, this is where a book like that will really help you, because it starts to talk about adjacencies. And I'll give an example. The adjacency between emergency department and imaging, and why that's important, and the movement back and forth between the two, those type of things. Those are the kind of things that you will be asked to know. Next. You said, we said earlier that you would have to be able to give out some factual information, and this is the type of information that you will be asked. It's not just operating rooms, it's on all kinds of spaces, and these are things that are spelled out in FGI, and again, things that are really great for like a little flashcard type of exercise, where you can say operating rooms, and this is how big they are, and then this slide shows the actual zoning of the room and understanding where the circulating nurse is and where the scrub nurse is. So a little bit about not only the sizes, but how they work. Next. And then finally, and we're getting close to the end here, at least of the presentation, but finally, some design strategies that relate to evidence-based design. Most of you know that the Center for Health Design maintains some of these components that are associated with a healing environment, and you need to be aware and know those. Most of you probably live those day in and day out. Also, there's great help out there, and our organization ACHA does a fantastic job. If you have questions, you can call, you can email them, you can get online. They will get back to you promptly and are very helpful in the whole process. So with that, I think we're going to spend the last 20 minutes or so going through some questions, and Greg, Craig, and I are just going to trade off here, and maybe Greg, since you started us off today, maybe you can take the first question.
Okay, all right, very good. Hey, I want to, Tim, there was a question by a lady who asked as far as the 6,000 hours, and either Tim or Craig can answer this better than I. I know the 6,000 hours, does that include the project? That is through design of the project. If the project went on the shelf, that's still a valid time towards your certification, isn't that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does not have to be a completed construction project, I guess is, I think it was Emily
Right,
Rivera.
right.
Okay. Okay, so this was great, and Tim and Craig, hopefully you all, it helped fill in some blank spaces as far as what you are going to need and be required to know to not only put together your portfolio, but to pass the exam. And again, hopefully we have given you some insight and given you some tips and new ideas. And you know, if you know other people, it's not a bad idea either. If you can, of course, you can have a mentor through the college, or you can actually put together a little study group. If you know that there's some people in your vicinity that's nearby, or even just a Zoom. Now everything's, I mean, look at us. We're doing a Zoom presentation to what, 20 something people. You can kind of do some group studies, and that helps you also become familiar and make new friends with other healthcare architects. So I would encourage that. So let's look at some questions, and I'll do question number 1. And it's when considering the design for information systems in any inpatient or outpatient healthcare project, the acronym EMR refers to. Now, this is just my little point of notice here. Obviously everyone, A, B, C, and D all have the initials EMR in them. But you can start to go through the process of elimination. Sometimes it's easier, it is for me, to cancel out the wrong answers first. And one or two of them just don't work. And you can just completely eliminate those, and then your mind is working on which one is the correct or which one is the best answer. So we're looking at the question, this first one. And what does the acronym EMR stand for? It's Electronic Medical Record. Hopefully you all got that. That's pretty, that should be a fairly simple one for you.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go. Yay, I got it right.
Okay. I'll take the second one here. At the completion of a large project to provide inpatient beds, all of the final project documents have been collected. The air balance for bone marrow transplant patient rooms is neutral with 12 air changes per hour. The architect should instruct the contractor to, the first option is to decrease the air change. The second option is to adjust for positive air balance. Third option, adjust for negative air balance. And then the fourth option is increase the air change. So this would be one of those situations where you really need to understand, what is a bone marrow transplant? What type of patient is in there? Their sensitivity level, are they immunocompromised? Is it need to be a net positive or negative environment in terms of pressurization of the room? If it's neutral, what do you do? So you want to analyze that and make a final determination. In this case, you really want to adjust the room for positive air balance, which is B.
All right. Question number 3, a replacement hospital project is 50% through construction. The owner notifies the architect that he or she wishes to change an endoscopy room to a treatment room. Which of the following is the most important consideration to be reviewed? So endoscopy to a treatment. A, structural modification. B, environmental requirements. C, radiation protection. D, room finishes. So on this one, you would want to understand that an endoscopy versus a treatment room is probably going to impact air changes. So it would be B, environmental requirements.
Okay, question number 4. Per the guidelines, negative air pressure is found in which of the following rooms? Hopefully things like this don't freak you out, because multiple choice questions are always kind of lurking in the back of my mind as being not as friendly as just straight questions. But again, it's the process of elimination, because you're given, you've got 4 options. You're given the opportunity to basically eliminate one of them, because if you look at A, B, C, and D, it gives you various scenarios. So what are we doing when we're looking at the negative air pressure found in which of the following rooms? What rooms will require negative air pressure? And first, again, kind of like what Tim was saying, you have to understand what is happening in that environment, both Tim and Craig. Which way do you want that air to be moving in that space? And this is a lot of times just from your experience, from your knowledge of working in healthcare facilities, that you understand which space has to be a negative space, which means the air is being drawn out of the room, or a positive space where the air is being pushed into the room. So we have an emergency triage room. We have an emergency waiting room. We have an operating room, or we have a patient toilet room. So your experience should, an understanding of the environment in a healthcare facility. An operating room does not want to be negative. You do not want to be drawing air into possibly contaminated air, air with bugs or anything, into an operating room. You want to be exhausting that air out of the operating room, so it's always being kept clean straight from through the air handlers, the HEPA filters, and all that kind of thing. So the answer to that is B. An emergency triage, emergency waiting, and the patient toilet rooms should be negative air pressure to draw air out of the spaces and not contaminate other people in the area.
Hey, Greg, I was just going to say one thing about that one that I find interesting is if you only knew an operating room was positively pressurized, you could arrive at that answer because you could eliminate
yeah, that's all you have to do is
three from every one of those, and all of a sudden you have the answer. If you questioned whether, if you had any question about the other three. So sometimes that's your reverse way of getting to the answer, is using the information you know.
Yes. Eliminate the wrong ones first.
Yep. Okay. So the next question: which of the following design criteria is least, and I'll reiterate, least important in planning a pediatric critical care unit? So understanding what's unique to maybe the pediatric critical care unit, and really would be the biggest priority in this type of care environment. So go through the list. A, visibility of the patient. That seems important to me. Ability to accommodate patients and families. I would certainly think in a type of environment, that would be important. Access to patient toilets. You have to question, are these patients, these pediatric patients, are they getting up and going to a toilet? Or are these ICU rooms really have toilets? In some cases, they don't. And then D, ability to accommodate crisis interventions. I would think that would be important. So if you had to prioritize, if you thought in your mind, well, we did one of these and we had a toilet, is the option of the owner or the client that wanted toilets in those rooms for flexibility, that you got to sometimes divorce your experience, like Tim said earlier. The right answer in terms of least important, knowing A, B, and D are all pretty important for this type of setting. The access to the patient toilets is probably the least important, even though those rooms might have them or might not, depending on the owner's goals for those rooms. Tim?
Next question. An existing two-story hospital is adding more patient beds. When preparing an analysis to determine whether to expand vertically or horizontally, which of the following should be done first? A, evaluate potential disruptions. B, confirm the existing structural capacity. C, determine exiting requirements. D, analyze sharing of utility services. Again, this is probably one that there's lots of great answers, but one is a non-starter, which is B, you need to confirm the structural capacity because it won't work to go vertically if that capacity is not there.
Okay, question number 8. The frozen section component of a laboratory is often located in close proximity to which of the following? This is a question that's going to test your knowledge of not only what areas are located as part of a laboratory or part of the pathology department in a healthcare facility, but who uses it the most and who needs to have it there, or is it in there? Is it just part of the pathology department? And then again, you need to know what is happening in a frozen section lab. The frozen section lab needs to be in close proximity to surgery. And the reason for that is it's a quick way for a surgeon, say he's doing a procedure and he's removing a tumor in a patient. He wants to see what that tumor looks like and how, if he's got, basically, maybe if he's got all of it, whatever he wants to do to see that thing, he's behind the red line, he can't leave. So this frozen section lab is a unique little spot where you're kind of behind the red line, but you're not, because what they'll do is they'll quickly freeze that sample, slice it into a real fine microscope adaptable pieces, so the surgeon can actually go and look and see what he's doing in those cases. So surgery is needs to be in the closest proximity to the frozen section lab.
So this is one of my favorites because it's that recall that Tim talked about earlier. Some of these actually can be pretty big confidence boosters, and sometimes if you get bogged down in the long drawn out process of elimination on multiple options, just tag that question and move forward and hit a few of these that you know from studying FGI or from NFPA. Or through your general practice, but what is the maximum allowable area for a smoke compartment in a hospital? And everyone hopefully knows that. That's 22.5 C. All of them have a little bit numbers if you don't want to get too bogged down in staring at the numbers and getting cross-eyed, but hopefully that's one everyone would know. And certainly a product of studying, you would be able to reiterate that one.
So Craig, that's an interesting question in light of this next question, which Craig's was more about just kind of regurgitating. This is more of an application. If a new hospital project has been designed at 360,000 building gross square feet and contains 5 equal floors, what is the minimum number of smoke compartments the facility could have? So what you want to do is work through how much square footage per floor. You divide those two, 360 by 5, that's 72,000 square feet per floor. And if you divide that by the 22.5 number that Craig just gave you, and you probably won't see these in order, the same order we saw them. They'll be divided. That's it's 3.2, so you round up to 4 per floor. So you have 4 smoke compartments per floor. So you times that by 5, and the right answer is B, 20.
Okay, we're on sample question number 11. If a healthcare facility design contract includes the requirements for evidence-based design decisions to achieve the best possible outcomes, the architect is expected to, and you can see the things here: interview clinicians and staff during schematic design, replicate decisions of similar high-performing healthcare facilities, maybe, conduct a post-occupancy evaluation. to me, that's the one you would kind of eliminate right off the bat because you're planning. You're not doing a post-occupancy. You're trying to get the best outcome before you occupy. And D, base decisions on credible scientific healthcare environment research. Like I say, I would have kicked out C right away. The clinicians and staff may not know. And it's really kind of up to us as the planners and designers of healthcare facilities to be experienced enough to be able to make this decision. B could be close, but the answer is D, because each facility is going to be different. And to replicate decisions made on one facility to another one is might get you into some trouble, might be a little dangerous, and it might not get you in trouble, but may not give you the results that you want. So D is the answer to that one, number 11.
Okay. And we can, if we want to stick to the 1 o'clock stop, we can go ahead and just go through 12, or we can keep on if people are interested in keeping on. Tim, I know you got a hard stop. So vibration okay, that's what I was thinking. Vibration considerations must be usually considered in the ceiling mounted equipment for which types of surgery. This particular question I found to be a little bit tricky, honestly. I think this is one of those, if you analyze it, you might think, well, all of these specialties require, special consideration for vibration. So if you go down the list, certainly you need to understand that, neurological, it's brain, and ophthalmic is eyes, oral, mouth, and the cardiovascular. So as you go through these various options and you try and limit them down, if your first thought is you're not sure about cardiovascular, you're yes on brain, so you're good with neurological. So you go 1, you just go down there and say you figure you're only, so C and D might be your only options using that process elimination. So 1 and 2, or 1 and 3. And so that's how my brain took this one. Even though I did get stuck on cardiovascular, thinking catheterizations and this sort of thing, or IR machines hanging from ceiling need special consideration for vibration. But the level of sensitivity that might compromise the procedure is really the consideration here. So the best answer is going to be the one, C, which is 1 and 2. And yep, so that one was a fun one for me.
So guys, I need to tap out here. I'm seeing a plea from Keith saying, please keep going. This is really helpful stuff.
Okay.
But feel free to go on without me.
So we've got 7 more questions,
on,
and I'll say, Tim, if I get yours wrong, you'll have to give me a hard time later on.
You can blame it on me.
Exactly.
All right. See you, everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, see you, Tim.
See you, Tim. Thank you. Okay, we're going to continue on with number 13. And this is great. I appreciate you all hanging with us. I'm sorry we kind of had a kind of a hard start trying to get things organized on our end. Example question 13. The hospital seeks to maximize throughput of its 4 ambulatory surgery rooms. Operating room utilization time, including turnaround, is 105 minutes per case. Existing spaces and utilization time per patient are as follows. And you're given a list of this information for your reference, and you're going to probably need a pencil and a paper. I guess, are you allowed to do that? Have note paper and stuff?
Yeah,
you should.
I believe they give you. I believe so.
Yeah, you can have a little tablet. You can't have calculators.
Yeah,
I guess you can have calculators.
Exactly.
Whatever.
I think you can. Yeah, just not a phone.
Yeah, the good news is, yeah, I think you can do that. But so you're given these four pieces of information as far as turnaround times, and then what additional space is required to optimize throughput? And it's an important question because it has a real important point to your planning. It's going to make space. It's going to be adding spaces, basically, is what's going to be happening here. So what is the most important thing that you need? The additional space required to optimize throughput. And we've got surgery prep bays, we've got admit and dress cubicles, stage 1 recovery, post-recovery chairs. You just, through your experience, knowing what's coming out on the other side, you're basically you're given a requirement. It's there is requirements already, or recommendations on to how many chairs or how many beds. But if you're going to have a backup, you don't want it backed up at the beginning, because you want to be able to move people through like a surgery suite quickly. And you can always do swing spaces and things on the other side. So surgery prep bays is your answer, and that's preparing the patients for the surgery, and then a lot of times those prep bays in an ambulatory situation become recovery in the afternoons.
Hey, Greg, I'm just going to add to that one real fast. This one is one where you might know best practice in an ambulatory surgery center for pre-op. Is if you look at your number of rooms. So if you look at your you have 4 rooms, and you've got 8 recovery chairs and 6. I mean, if you add your post, you see the ratios seem appropriate for based on the number of rooms. But if you have 4 rooms and you've got 2 prep bays, you might say, well, there's 2 prep bays serving 4 rooms. That seems like a low ratio. And it might be a best practice thing, and it might just be actually straight up FGI telling you need 1.5, at least 1 or 1.5 cubicles per OR. And so it might be a recall scenario. So just keep that in mind when you go through the logic on this. But to me, not even knowing what FGI might say in terms of the required ratio, to me, that 2 surgery prep bay seems odd, because relative to the number of rooms, it seems like it's a low ratio. So basic application of experience can really help inform your decision on this one.
Right. Very good.
Okay. So on this one says nuclear imaging scans typically allow observation of which of the following. So this might be your experience with doing a cardiovascular imaging center. You might immediately get into thinking about what was involved in that, and what type of equipment actually did you have in those facilities. And so, so as your mind starts to process that, brain activity through electronic physiological monitoring, that's A. B is ambulatory EKG recorded over a 24-hour period. C is EEG and EKG monitoring via both video and audio monitoring. And then D is cardiovascular performance through monitoring and SPECT. And SPECT is a type of machine, single proton emission computed tomography. So a lot of these acronyms you might get bogged down in, but you might immediately go to your experience of the last imaging center you did, and you might link the two. That you had a nuclear imaging room in there, and you had a SPECT machine in there as well. So that would lead you to that D answer there.
Okay, this is a good question because it's testing your um, it's in the programming analysis of spaces. So this is before anything gets drawn. It's actually laying these spaces out and getting things in the correct order. And again, it's a multiple choice. But the question in programming analysis of spaces in a hospital, which of the following conditions present the most significant operational challenges? And again, this is going to be kind of an experience thing. But this is something that needs to be pretty well determined and analyzed and explained sometimes to the client what is important and what is not as important when putting pieces together. I always like to do, it's kind of old school, kind of the bubble diagram things, but it's a great way to lay out the spaces. So we're told that we've got surgery separated from surgical ICU, C-section separated from the OB unit, pathology separated from surgery, and emergency separated from imaging. And again, it's kind of working backwards, which are the most important, and which ones just don't seem exactly right. So in the programming spaces, which of the following conditions present the most significant operational challenges? I just give you the answer is answer B. The most significant operational challenges is going to be surgery separated from surgical ICU. In other words, that's getting that patient from the OR to a bed. And to an ICU bed. And then number two is a C-section from OB. That's important because if something happens to the mom or the baby, say during delivery, labor and delivery, and there's a critical moment, you have to go to C-section. You have to go to an operating room. And usually in the OB, there is, in the maternity ward in that area where they're delivering, there is usually a C-section room. It's an OR that's set up just for that emergency. And the last one, number four, emergency separated from imaging. And Tim mentioned that earlier. Emergency and imaging are two big pieces of your planning puzzle, and they need to be really close together. As opposed to pathology separated from surgery. As I explained in an earlier question, the frozen section lab can be separate, but pathology deals with many areas throughout the hospital. It doesn't have to be as close to surgery as the other three items, their relationships.
Okay. The next one, a common departmental adjacency relationship would be to locate a clinical decision unit, a CDU, adjacent to which of the following departments? So this would be one of those you'd think about, what is a CDU function in a hospital, which, when you're trying to, you have an intake of patients, they come in and you're trying to determine, the care path they're going to take. You have to think about that a little bit. Yeah, certainly it's helpful to understand how that specific, unique function to a hospital, what it typically plugs into. So A is surgery, B is medical records, C is emergency, and D is the nursing unit. So hopefully from experience, you would know that it's C, emergency, typically is it's somewhat, determining a patient's care path when they come into an ER in terms of how, based on their situation, how they need to be routed. CDU is a one component to that kind of triaging.
Okay, question 17. The emergency department staff has stated that they do not have sufficient space as evidenced by patients and equipment located in the corridor. Isn't that a lovely sight? All right, the architect should first, okay? So we've got kind of, this is a kind of a two-part question almost. You've got a project and the staff is telling you they don't have room. You see that. What's the first thing you should do? Okay, because all these things are viable options. Do you review volume and capacity data? Do you study expansion options? Do you propose fast track a care unit? Or do you assess clinical decision unit length of stay? I think, like I say, all of these kind of have there's an idea. It's almost something that you need to address in your planning process. It's something that needs to happen right up front, and that's to review the volume and capacity data. They may be putting patients and equipment in the corridor because they don't have enough room. Now, that's not saying study expansion options or propose fast track. You got to know what you're expanding to and what you're studying first. So it's always best when you have a situation, no matter if it's an ED or what, you want to, patient rooms, ICUs, you want to be able to understand what the throughput is, how many people are coming in and out through that department, how many patients are coming in and out through that department, what's their length of stay, and is there a way to work with the numbers to make it work before you start expanding a hospital, which is, what are we talking about, several $100s a square foot. You might be able to just take care of it by just understanding their protocols and helping them determine what comes first, who moves through a space first, and how do you utilize that space. And that's your volume and capacity data.
Great point. Okay. Which is one of the most dynamic components for staffing of 125 bed suburban community hospital due to cyclical demand? So again, this is the most dynamic component. You got to always like to reread that and kind of reiterate that in my mind. So the first option is intensive care. The second option is the emergency department. The third option, ambulatory surgery, and the fourth, imaging. So what's the most dynamic in staffing? What has the most fluctuation and unpredictability, I guess, is what you have to think about in your head. And typically ambulatory surgeries are scheduled. So through just kind of the process of elimination and each of these items, I think emergency has certainly the ability to be the most dynamic, the most unpredictable. And therefore, if you have staffing challenges, you could have a patient surge unexpectedly and then have the need for more staff needs unexpectedly in a dynamic situation. Two more questions.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's really a good question, and that's I just like that, because you made a great point, Craig, and that's understanding what the facility does. And you're talking about an ambulatory facility, and like you say, most of the procedures, things going on in that facility are scheduled. So what is going to be the most dynamic and the most, as far as understanding schedules and timing, what's going to be the biggest X factor, and that would be the emergency department. Number 19, when designing a rural critical access hospital, which of the following is the most important aspects of the plan? Okay, you have to understand what's one of the biggest problems with a rural critical access hospital. Maintenance usually isn't a problem. You usually have people that are you're out in the rural. Remember, yeah, I saw somebody was making a little circle around rural. Rural is the key word. Lower maintenance costs, that's going to be there. Outpatient access, I mean, that's probably its highest patient load is an outpatient type of facility. Helipad location, of course, that's important because it's usually tied to some tertiary center somewhere else. The hardest thing for a critical access hospital is finding professional staff. And so a lot of times they're going to be short-staffed. And as a result, you have to be able to understand scheduling. You have to understand what type of staff you want to hire to maintain and to function in that facility. Like I say, the hospital itself is going to be a hospital. It's getting people, and I've run into that problem at, rural South Texas, where they were paying doctors enormously huge amounts of money to come work in their critical access hospital because it was out in the middle of nowhere, and the docs were okay with it, but the docs' families did not want to go. They wanted to be somewhere in an urban area where they can go shopping and go to the mall and have restaurants and all that, instead of living in some little town out in the middle of nowhere that that didn't have the amenities. So a lot of times you run into that, which has no medical background or basis whatsoever. It was literally, they couldn't get families to come out there. So finding the staffing for something like that is usually the biggest challenge in a rural setting.
Yep. And then our last question. This is actually understanding of a similar type of facility, a critical access hospital. Which of the following kinds of patient beds are allowed in a critical access hospital? So this is usually, most people understand that the 25 inpatient beds is what defines typically, that's the critical access hospital. Some people may not understand some of the other allowances for their bed count beyond that 25. And this is where you might, if you don't know if you're not totally familiar with that type of facility, you might get hung up. And this is where process of elimination might work for you a little bit. So in this case, 10 rehabilitation beds is the first option. 12 psychiatric beds is the second option. 25 inpatient beds is the third, and swing bed, skilled nursing unit beds is the fourth. So you, if you've worked in this type of facility, you might have actually implemented a swing bed type of room to allow for certain reimbursement. So you might know that quickly 3 and 4 are in play into the correct answer. So if you were to go to the C and D have 3 and 4 both. So then you have to make a determination of 1 and 2. The 10 rehab beds or the 12 psychiatric beds. I happen to know that 10, you can have actually up to 35 beds in this type of critical access hospital that includes 10 rehabilitation beds. So that would be the answer. 1, 3, 1, 3, and 4 would be your answer. And with that, I hope that was super helpful to everyone. I think we kept our hour and a half with our delay at the beginning. Again, we apologize for our tech difficulties.
Hey, Craig.
Yeah.
Keith Lacoste has a question, and you might know off the top of your head quicker. Where can I find more information determining FTEs for hospital departments? Generally, the first place to go is to
time equivalent.
The client. Yeah, but is there a document that kind of gives you a rules of thumb? I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
In terms of understanding staffing requirements for various types of facilities. Yeah.
That's what yeah.
We've got a lot of, I guess we've got resources for that we use. Space Med and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Some of those resources we have here, in-house tools that help us understand that. But typically what we do is we will plug in for projecting volumes. We'll plug in those variables and through an interview session and a data collection from the clients. And we'll use our resources from like SpaceMed and that those sort of tools to arrive at, you know, the program based on, you know, anticipated, you know, throughput requirements.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is basically you want to go to the client first, and that's what should be one of the things that you're discussing as far as if you're looking at FTEs, is what's their staffing now, what is their staff load, and are they buried with work, or do they have people sitting around on their thumbs, which definitely doesn't happen in a hospital.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
you
see the question about the. Yeah, exactly.
Somebody,
you see the question
that was a question
about FGI? I believe FGI, the 2018 version, acknowledges the additional 10 beds for the rehab beds for a critical access hospital. I do know it's a reimbursement mechanism. What I think critical access hospitals get, like, is it over 10%, or they get like 110% or something on the reimbursement compared to a standard facility. So they basically get a reimbursement over the normal CMS reimbursement, right? And I believe, I want to say that FGI defines, there's a chapter specific to critical access hospitals. And I believe but that is typically the reimbursement for, you have to be outside of a certain distance. I want to say it's like 35 miles from another hospital.
Yes.
Yeah. So
35
there's a distance that you basically want to be kind of a healthcare kind of desert. I mean, you want to that it's encouraging these underserved areas through higher reimbursement. But you are limited on your number of beds to fall into that category. If you're remote and outside the 35 bed category, you would be actually outside that reimbursement eligibility for that reimbursement, from my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Right. I think I'm looking. I think we've answered the questions.
There's one more, gentleman, on
okay.
how closely are the sample questions to the actual exam questions? Do you see that one?
Yeah, I'd say they're very close. One thing we didn't touch on, or we didn't have an example of, but I think Tim touched on it pretty nicely. They're like, for instance, someone asked about the operating room diagram. I think there was, on the question or the exam I took, there was probably 3 questions around an OR, and it had A, B, C, and D zone. And so if you messed up anesthesiologist and the nurse, circulating nurse, you could actually miss more than one question. So there are some graphic questions that we haven't accurately probably shown in our sample set, but I think Tim did a nice job in illustrating, like, the stacking diagrams. You will see some, it'll show you 2 different stacking diagrams, and it will show an imaging department next to an ER, or an imaging department 4 stories away from the ER. And you want to basically represent that you don't want that imaging department 4 stories away from your ER. You want to, make it directly adjacent to. There are going to be some of those graphical depictions of some of the items we've discussed. Many of the straight up questions might be illustrated in a graphic manner. But I would say the practice exam, if you want to gauge where you were today, take the practice exam, because I feel it's a pretty good representation of the exam, and you'll get a feel for your level of, or where you might be a little weak. I was weak in the first section, so I did a lot of Googling of a lot of the business, what the business of is it a lot of the acronyms? I had a little medical dictionary, and I was learning acronyms and some of that sort of thing. So you might determine through your practice exam where you might be falling short. Look at your detailed content outline. That gives you a lot of breakdown. That's on the website, and you can see the forces of healthcare. And some, like if you need to read up on what a bundled payment system is, for instance, or if you don't really understand CMS, do a little homework on what CMS is, the Center for Medicare Services. Look at, get a little idea. Look at what, some of these various forces, and they're listed in that detailed course outline, and you might not know what some of them are. If you don't know what they are, look them up. Spend some time researching them. You might be a star in the FGIA, and your recall is kind of your, slam dunk, and you don't really have to concentrate on understanding the size of an OR or the minimum clearance. Determine your area of weakness, and then concentrate on that. And I think that a practice exam will help you get there.
Great point. Okay, I think we should probably put a wrap on this. Again, I appreciate everybody's time, and hopefully this was a benefit to you. Hopefully this encourages you to, if you haven't already signed up for the candidate program, to do that, and to encourage you to move forward in this very special, specialized aspect of architecture. Unique, and it's different, and it's complicated, and to become a certificate holder in the American College of Healthcare Architecture will give you the recognition not only to your fellow professionals, but also to your client, that you have gone that one step further to assure them that you have the qualifications and the knowledge and the skill and the desire to give them the best environmentally designed and the best functional project that you can give them. So thank you all for participating. I appreciate your time again, and please don't be afraid to send questions to send us questions, and we'll respond to that. Thank you very much.